Craig from Connecticut. First of all, I want to thank the DTO for existing, for providing this opportunity. I found out about you guys 4.5 years ago and started practicing with you 4 years ago. And it has made a tremendous difference in my life. So I thank you. I have a lot of gratitude. My talk today, there's a lot of stuff that came up over the year based on the readings that we do in class, but then also other readings. What I wanted to talk to you today was about a fairly recent one that I came across. I've been reading the Denko Roku, which is the principal work of Keizan Zenji. This is the Cleary translation. The title is The Transmission of Light. So the Denko Roku is was written in 1300, and it's 1600 years or so of Dharma transmission in the Soto Zen tradition. And it's basically what was the epiphany, what was the moment of awakening for these people that carried on the lineage. This particular one was Parshva. From Parshva was the 10th successor in the lineage, and he accepted as a student Punya-Yashash, which may not be the way you pronounce it, but he wound up being the 11th successor in it. So they're generally in the form of a koan with then some interpretation. And it's interesting, the koan itself has got some really powerful lessons in it. So that by itself is reason enough to discuss it or to think about it. But in the course of discussing it and thinking about it, I realized that I had a fundamental misunderstanding about something that I learned a long, long time ago, and this brought it out. So I'll get to that at the end. So this is the koan. Punya-Yashash stood before Parshva. Parshva asked him, "Where do you come from?" Punya-Yashash said, "My mind is not in movement." "Where is your abode?" "My mind is not stationary." "Are you certain?" "The Buddhas were also thus." Then Parshva said, "You are not the Buddhas, and the Buddhas also are not so." This last statement caused Punya-Yashash to spend the next 3 weeks in deep contemplation, trying to understand what Parshva meant by it, realizing his truth. After he finally realized the truth, he came back and said, "Even the Buddhas are not really so, and neither are you." And at that point, Parshva was then accepted. Parshna then accepted Punya-Yashash as his student. So the interpretation of this was partly mine, partly what I read. But I was impressed by the first two questions that Punya-Yashash had. So where do you come from? My mind is not in movement, meaning that there is coming and going on the outside, but within the mind, it is still. So my mind is not in movement. His response to where is your abode? And abode to me had special significance. But where is your abode? He said, my mind is not stationary, meaning that his mind does not abide anywhere. And again, abide, the meaning, it's the translation, I think, is the patishita, meaning to contain in or to be situated in. So Punya-Yashash doubled down when Parshva asked him, "Are you certain?" by saying, the Buddhas were also thus. And so he was trying to lend credence to his thought, saying that, well, the Buddhists thought this also. So it's, it is a correct thing to think. But then Parshna kind of smote him when he said, "You are not the Buddhas, and the Buddhas are not so." So this meaning of that was that, your thoughts are good. They're still just thoughts. Don't try to be a Buddha, he said. The Buddhas didn't try to be Buddhas. So your aspirations cannot be realized by chasing concepts, because your aspirations is for something that is non-conceptual. I mean, the concepts can get you there, but you have to leave them behind. So after 3 weeks, Parshna was able to free himself. After 3 weeks, he was able to free himself from the Buddhas. So the term that they use there, which is, I think, a quite evocative term, is this is awakening acceptance of the uncreated. Oh, I'm running out of time. 300 seconds goes by fast. The chronicler recaps this by saying, "My mind is not the Buddhas, and not you either. Coming and going have been here all along." So in this case, coming and going are the waves on the ocean of the samsaric waves on the ocean. So the interesting side note that this brought up was when they were talking about the word abide. A long time ago, I read a passage from the Diamond Sutra and didn't realize it was the Diamond Sutra at the time, but abiding nowhere, let the mind work. And it was just kind of blew me away when I heard that, and still does. But in hearing Punyayasha's response to where is your abode, saying my mind is not stationary, I realized that I had misinterpreted it without thinking about it. Instead of the expression being abiding nowhere, I had come to think about it without really realizing it, that I was thinking it was being nowhere, which is very different than abiding nowhere. So abiding is to be caught by your mental formations, but being nowhere is not possible, because we exist in this coming and going. This is where our lives are. So anyway, I realized that, well, so this had the effect of disavowing that the coming and going have been here all along, that the commentator talked about, and caused me to skillfully disengage. So it was an interesting realization. I don't think I did it all the time, but I think it was there underlying a lot of my actions. So skillful means is vitally important. Thank you.
Feedback for Craig?
This is Dave. Thank you so much, Craig. I actually recently have been exploring going back to the Koan and related practices. Could you tell us again the source for that particular one that you spoke of? Like a collection that it's part of?
Sure. The book is Transmission of Light. So Zen and the Art of Enlightenment by Master Keizan. So Keizan was, I think, a successor to Dogen. So he wrote it, and he was doing a recollection of all of the masters for the past 13 or 1600 years. Okay. The particular one that I'm looking at was translated by Thomas Cleary. But it is actually, it's the Denko Roku is what the work is. Okay. Cleary just named his Transmission of Light.
Denko Roku?
Yeah, Denko Roku. Denko Roku.
Thank you.
And so it's just a series of 53 different chapters on the different masters and how they came to their initial awakening. This one was Punyayasha.
I was able to get most of the stuff down that you said was involved in it, about mind is not in motion, mind is not stationary, and so forth. So I was just thinking, if I have that reference back to the original, that'll be nice, because that actually, as a lot of the things that have been said in the past, 30-40 minutes, that hit home pretty soon.
Cool.
So
thank you.
Thank you.
It did for me also.
Yeah, good.
Right. This is Michelle. I just, I don't have any questions or any bright comments at this point, other than to say, as always, you've left me with something to now go and think about even more. So maybe I'll come back in 3 weeks with a comment. But I just want to say thank you, because I do appreciate the breadth of practice that you do have. And it's evident, when you bring forth a topic for us, whether it's 5 minutes or whether it is sitting with you for an entire class, I learn something every time. So I'll be back in 3 weeks. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Good morning, Craig. This is Richard. Richard Z. We have 2 Richards, of course, in our Sangha. So I appreciated your mentioning the Diamond Sutra, which I think that line was coming to mind for me as well. I think it perfectly fits with the wisdom in this koan. So my question for you is, do you remember from our studies maybe 2 or 3 years ago, who was awakened while walking through the marketplace when he heard a nun chanting that line in particular from the Dharma, or from the Diamond Sutra.
Hunen.
Yeah.
Huning, or the fifth patriarch.
Sixth patriarch.
Sixth
Yeah.
patriarch, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a
Dwell
great story.
nowhere and bring forth this mind. A few years ago, I read a book, kind of a very casual book, but well worth reading. And it was a conversation, I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, between Bernie Glassman Roshi and Jeff Bridges. And they talked about that particular line. And they went a step further with it, which at the time I found kind of provocative, and I sat with it for several months. And they just said that when you dwell nowhere, in a sense, you open yourself up to everything. So another way to look at it is you're dwelling everywhere, and being receptive to everything, which I thought was an interesting sort of way to look at it from another side.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a chapter in the Tao Te Ching I've always appreciated. It's, I want to say chapter 47, and it starts with these words: without going outside your room, you may know the whole world. And without looking through your window, you may see the ways of heaven, which I think kind of captures the gist of the same teaching. But beautiful presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.